variables in order to say anything meaningful about this, and that would be a very valid concern. So counterfactual inference might be very difficult sometimes, precisely because of this challenge. But still, even though challenging, that this is still not impossible. And moreover, in certain cases, we can use observational data and interventional data, combine it together, and get some bounds on counterfactuals. So say like, okay, probability of, if you change your degree, the probability of you having more money today, let's say, would be between 20 and 40%. So we can get a bound like this. I hope this clarifies. If not, please feel free to write another question in the chat.
Yeah, so there's another question actually, but I don't know if it's exactly related to what you're saying or if we should keep it for the Q&A session.
Okay.
So it's a question from Kemal, and it's you said causal knowledge goes beyond data. What other factors affect causal knowledge? Maybe previous theories about worlds?
Oh, great. That's a great question. I think we will leave it for the end because I hope that at least some of the things that we will discuss will give you a little bit more background and will put all of us in a better position to discuss this. Max, if you could remember this question for us,
sure.
So we can.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then I see we have some more questions. So let's get back to those questions. Some very good questions. But let's get back to them later because I believe that what we'll talk about now will give us a better foundation, to discuss these ideas.
Makes sense.
Great. So we talked about the theory of causality, and I see that it's not entirely clear for all of us so far. Some details here, for instance, how interventions and counterfactuals are different, and we'll talk about this a little bit more soon. But now I want to change the perspective a little bit for us and go into something more practical. How do we translate these ideas into something more viable? So in the Perlian framework, the original Perlian framework, we use this formalism of directed acyclic graphs, or DAGs. For those of you who might say like, oh, but some systems are cyclic, well, maybe we can argue at the end of the talk if that's really the case. But even if we cannot be sure, or our data, the frequency of sampling of our data does not allow us to unroll a system into the acyclic form, there are other formalisms that can be applied then. One of them comes from Bernard Schilkop that we mentioned earlier, and his collaborators Lars Lorch and Andreas Krause. And they proposed a method that uses stationary diffusions and stochastic differential equations in order to capture causality in systems that are modeled as cyclic systems. But we will focus on DAGs today, and there are good reasons for this, because it will give us much more clarity in order to build, and we'll be able to build on top of this in a much more efficient way, effective way, than if we go into the details of other alternative approaches. So let's imagine that we have a fire alarm system, and this fire alarm system only consists of 3 elements or 3 variables. The alarm itself only reacts to smoke. Okay, so this is a smoke detector-based fire alarm, which means it won't react to the temperature. It only reacts to the smoke particles in the air. And so if we think about this, we could present it as a graph like this. There is a fire causes smoke, and smoke causes alarm. We can think about this probabilistically or deterministically. For the sake of simplicity, we can think about it now deterministically, but there's nothing in this entire concept, entire framework that we are discussing that would not allow us to think probabilistically. It's actually a framework that comes from probability. So, okay, so we can think about this way. Now there is an interesting property to the system. And the property is that if we control for smoke, which means if we observe smoke, alarm and fire become independent. In other words, giving you a practical example, if I came to your room with a bag full of smoke and I would just release the smoke, the alarm would go off. If there was a fire in the room, but we open the window and make sure that all the smoke goes out through the window, the alarm would not go off. Which means that smoke, all the information that comes from fire to alarm goes through smoke. And if we observe smoke, there is no additional information in fire from the point of view of the alarm. Now, an interesting thing about this is that this example, we can make this example more abstract. Just say there are some three variables A, B, and C, and the same independence pattern will hold, which means that whatever variable is A, if A causes B and B causes C, and we observe B, A and C become independent. In other words, this is also called the conditional independence, which means that A and C are conditionally independent given B. Unconditionally, if we don't control for B, we don't observe B, A and C will be related because there is some information flowing from A to C via B. But if we control for B, you can think of it as closing the water flow in this line, in the direction of the arrows, and A and C become independent. So it turns out that people were thinking about this for a while, Judea Pearl and other people as well, and this already has a name, and the name is chain. So this structure is called a chain. But that's definitely not the only structure that we could construct between three different variables. And there's another structure called a fork. In fork, we have B causing A and B causing C. Now, I will ask you a question. If we just observe the system as it is without controlling for anything, will A and C be dependent or independent?
Interesting. Waiting for your questions in the chat, or your answers, probably more than questions.
So the question is, if we observe A and C only.
So we have Marcio saying dependent and Devendra saying independent.
So Mars is
also someone is raising their hand. Let me just check the chat.
And Björn is saying dependent.
Rahim, you are now allowed to talk, and you should unmute your mic.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for this session. So, if we are trying to consider for A and C without taking B into consideration, A and C will be dependent to one another because we don't have any variable that will make them to be independent. So it will create spurious correlations between A and C.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and that's also what many people said in the chat. But probably most people said this in the chat. So if we only look at A and C, they will be dependent. And that will be one of the potential models that could explain the data that we've seen in the space launches versus sociology PhDs, right? Maybe there is a third variable that is impacting both the number of non-commercial space launches and sociology PhDs. So maybe the doctorates would be, or the PhDs would be C, and then space launches would be A, and B maybe be, I don't know, economy or whatever this is. But if we control for B, as Rahim told us, if we control for B, they will become independent because there is no other information flow between those two different variables other than through B. So they are inheriting some information from B, both of them. But if we control for the source of information, there is no other source of information that they share. That's great. So we had a chain, and now we had a fork, and we said, okay, the independence, the conditional independence structure between those two are identical. which again goes back to our conclusions, to our takeaway. The data is not enough for us. The data itself is not sufficient for us to recover the